Before you start modding Rome 2, you're going to need a couple of tools. You're going to need Pack File Manager, which is a community-made tool in order to edit the variables in the game. And you're going to need Assembly Kit, which you can download from the Tools section of your Steam library. I'm going to link a tutorial in the description which includes how to get these things. I'm also going to have direct links to Pack File Manager so you can go ahead and download the most recent version. So the first thing you want to do is open up Tweak, go to Tools, and open Variant Editor. That will bring you up to this window. You won't have a model here at first. That is because you can create your own unit out of assets that are already in the game. So here I've already made my unit because it's pretty straightforward. You just put tunics in the tunic slot, helmets in the helmet slot. Of course, you can have some things in different slots, like in the hair, I have their tunic. And in the beard slot, that's where I put the character's head, arms, and legs. So all of your assets are here on the right side, and it'll all appear here. All you have to do is double click something here, and it will appear on the model. A lot of them are incompatible with each other, so they'll clip and not look quite right, so you want to play with this a little bit. But this is pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to spend a whole lot of time on this. One very important note here, though, is the weapons. So I've added a Roman gladius here, and it should have an attach point. So weapon 2, I've got attach point weapon 2. These attach points actually determine the animation that the model will use in game. So I have a Roman gladius on the shield as well because I want this character to look like they're dual wielding gladius. So on this shield I would put attach point 3 because that's where shields go, and on attach point 2 for their main weapon. So just to reiterate, attach point 1 would be two-handed weapons like spears, lances, and pikes. Attach point 2 is swords, daggers, axes, and clubs, things that are one-handed. Attach point 3 is shields. Attach point 4 is bows or slings. And then attach point 5 is the projectile used by the bow or sling. So you'd put arrows and bullets there. That's pretty much the only important part. These slot names don't actually matter too much. You'll just have to play around with this because it's a little bit finicky, but essentially you can just look at what I've done here and kind of copy it yourself. So the next thing you want to do is open Pack File Manager. I've got 5.2.4 here in 2020. And in Pack File Manager, this is where you're going to be making the unit actually function in the game. There is so much room for failure here, so don't be ashamed if you mess some things up. It can all come down to a typo in a single line somewhere. So what you do first is you make a new file, and then you can rename your file. Actually, you have to save it as something, and then just save it as, I'm just going to save it as Archon Female. So once you've saved it here, you want to begin adding the base game files you want to modify. Never modify the base game files because you will ruin your game. You want to add files from the base game into your mod. So, how do you do that? You right-click on the name of your file here, and you want to add from pack, and then there is all of these are my mods, but then there's also the base game files, data_rome2.pack. This is the base game. This is where most of the files will come from. And open up to DB, database, and then there's a bunch of tables you want to add here. The tables you want to add will be right-clicked to add them into your project. So one of them is buildings units allowed. So you need to scroll down, find buildings, units allowed here, and then you right click the term and it says added into your project, and you can hit OK. And now that's in your project, you can edit it. I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the part where I've got everything added. These are the required elements if you want to have a working unit that works in the campaign. So there are a couple of other things you have to do. The database we get from data Rome 2, but then there's some text. We've got the UI for the unit card and then the variant mesh definition. So you add the text from local English pack. So that would be local English pack right here. And then you go down, get the text, database, and then you find unit descriptions and land units. Unit descriptions and land units is somewhere else in here. And then for the unit card, I'm not going to show how to make a unit card because that's annoying to do. Essentially, you can use base game cards, you can export base game cards and edit them to fit your character. I will link another tutorial in the description that goes over that more, but I don't want to focus on that here. Okay, so let's say you don't have the variant mesh definition in your mod. Totally fine. It's nice and simple to do. The important factor is where your variant mesh definitions are. So I have variant meshes, then variant mesh definitions, and in variant mesh definitions is my variant mesh definition file. This is how my character looks. These two need to be named as such. Variant meshes, then variant mesh definitions. Because here, I'm going to right-click Add Directory. I'm going to select Variant Meshes, and it's going to add everything below it. Okay, so now it shows up in my mod as Variant Meshes, Variant Mesh Definitions, and then there are all the character models that I have exported. I only need this one, so I'm deleting the others. I'm going to rename it Rome_Arcani. And I'm going to save so all the changes are shown. Okay, so once you have all these tables, then you can get to work. You might not have the UI tables because you will probably end up using a base game unit card for your first mod, but once you start making custom cards, this is where those will go. So we've got our variant mesh definition, and for the sake of making sure everything is the same, we want to take this name, Rome Arcani, and we're going to copy that. And you can see I've already renamed some of these files. We'll do the text last. So in our variance tables, when you've added straight from the base game, you'll have the variant of every single unit in the game. You can just select the first row, scroll all the way down and hold shift and select the last row and just press the delete key on your keyboard and it will totally clear it out. Then you're going to add a row and paste your Rome Arcani, which for some reason is not pasting for me, just like that. And there you go. That's your variant name. So I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to go to Units to Groupings Military Permissions. This is stating which factions can use your custom unit. So mine is Arcani for Rome. I only want it to be used by Roman factions. So I put the name of the unit here and then the military group here. So I've chosen Roman, Roman Emperor, Caesar, and Gaul Roman. So that's all the DLCs up to the point I created this mod originally. Units Custom Battles Permissions. I'm allowing the regular base game Rome and all of the Empire Divided Rome factions to use my Arcani. If you want these units to appear as a general unit, you just check this box off. And Siege Unit Attacker and Defender should just always be checked off. Units Variance Tables. So this table, this is how the game can add some variation to the height of your units, but this is also where you assign the unit variant from the variant mesh definition and their unit card. So if you don't have a custom card, you can find a base game unit card that's similar to yours and you can type it in here. But these three should be your unit. Height variation, so it takes your height scale and then this number is how far away from your height scale can it go, positive or negative. So they could be 1.075 height or 0.925 height. So a very slight variation. You can make this drastic. You can make that 0.5 and your unit would have some people being extremely tall and some extremely short. Unit variance colors. This is actually not a required table. I just wanted my unit to be the same color no matter what faction they were on. Usually the unit will conform to whatever faction they're on, but this overrides that. So I've put my unit here and then I've made it all red. So no matter what faction they're on, they're going to have red coloring. You do not need this table though. Unit set to unit junctions. So this defines what the unit is in game. If you wave over a unit, it says swords or spears or pike infantry. So this is what defines that. Unit cast, category, class, that's all blank. You can put the Rome Arcani in unit record, and then the unit set. You have all of these things to choose from. Of course, this is a sword unit, so I want melee units swords, and exclude, you don't have to worry about that. That's always unchecked. Unit description, short text. So I'll come back to this. Historical texts. I will also come back to this. Very important. So for a little bit of extra credit, we're going to add some attributes to our Arcani. So I'm just going to take Arcani here, and I'm going to add it to the attribute slot in land units. So that means they're looking for an attribute group called Rome_Arcani. We need to go to the attributes groups tables and create that attribute group. So here's Rome Arcani. And then unit attributes to group junctions. So this is essentially saying, here is the attribute group we just made, and here's all of the things we're going to apply to that attribute group. So campaign stealth, this unit can't be spotted by other armies. Disciplined, they don't really care if the general dies. Encourages, they have an aura of encouraging, and so on. So we're saying anyone who has the attribute group Rome_Arcani will have these passive abilities. Just check from base game units, or I guess you can use the drop-down menu here to see what these are. Like if you're making berserkers, you can put berserk on them, or they're immune to scare, or they scare enemies. All those passive abilities go in the attributes table. And then once you have it completed, go ahead and go into land units, and near the end of this table will be the unit attributes drop down. Yep, attribute group right here. And of course there's plenty of base game ones to choose from, so you can choose berserker infantry or whatever, missile camels. There's plenty of base ones. But for me, nothing fit perfectly, so I went ahead and made my own attribute group. Okay, and then once we've made it to the top here, land units should go first. So land units is where you define a lot of the unit's stats. So you want in the key is your unit name. Accuracy is 5. Ammo, if they're a ranged unit, this is how much ammo they'll start with. Armor, you can see there's a lot to choose from. Each of these has a set value. So it's been too long, I don't remember all the values. But it's not, you don't have to say, well, my unit's actually wearing leather armor, so I'm going to give them leather in this. You could you could assign them, cataphract elite armor, and they would have a ridiculous amount of armor in the game. It's not directly linked to how your unit looks. Campaign action points, that's how far they can move on the campaign map. So artillery, for example, has a really low campaign action points, and it will drag your army down if you have them in there. Category infantry melee. There's only a few things here, pretty self-explanatory. Charge bonus, self-explanatory. Class infantry melee. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Dismounted charge bonus. This stuff doesn't matter on an infantry unit that is never on a horse. Historical description text. So a long time ago, this did not exist, and it was like variable 11 or something, and you could just type placeholder here, and everything would work fine. This has become an absolute requirement, and it is the cause of most unit mods breaking after the most recent update. So the reason historical description text is placeholder is because if I go down to here and I go to historical text, I've just got placeholder there. And that's literally all you need. I don't have anywhere that defines what placeholder is. I'm just telling the game placeholder is a historical text, and then I assign it to my unit in land units, and they'll actually show up in the game. I've seen so many comments of people asking why their custom units aren't showing up in the game, despite following tutorials perfectly. Well, that's because all the tutorials are outdated because this placeholder has become a requirement rather than something you can ignore. So if you have placeholder here, make sure you have historical text placeholder there. I suppose you could probably use a base game one as well, but for whatever reason, not having this assigned to something that's in the historical text table will result in your unit being totally gone from the base game. The next thing is the animation. So I gave my unit a sword in their right hand and a sword in their left hand. Unfortunately, there's no dual-wielding swords animation set, so I assigned them sword and shield. You can look at base game units to find what kind of animations there are because it seems it doesn't have a drop-down menu here. This entity, so this is when you wave over a unit, it'll say they're very heavy or they're super heavy. These are all of your options. Melee attack, defense, morale, hit points, all of those things very self-descripting. Their mount, you'll have to look at base game units again for reference. A lot of this is referencing what did the developers originally do, and then how can I slightly modify that. Number of animals, this is if you're making like a dog handler's unit or an elephant's unit, I believe, potentially. That affects their handled animals. Number of mounts should be 1-to-1 with the characters. Primary melee weapon. So like the armor earlier, this defines their weapon strength. So over here, you can add their melee attack and melee defense. This is their weapon damage stat. And that is again set. They use terms from the game, like a gladius, for example, but the gladius just has a set weapon strength. And even if your character doesn't have a gladius, you can set it as Rome gladius. Doesn't matter. Javelin precursor, primary missile weapon. They don't have a missile weapon, so I don't have to worry about this. But this is again, what is the weapon strength of the ranged weapon your character or your unit has? So if you want to make a really overpowered mod, I guess you could make a giant ballista. Set that as their primary missile weapon. That'll give them the damage of a giant ballista. Or you can be more balanced and make it like a composite bow or a bow. Rank depth, so this is how, like standing in straight lines, how many rows of infantry there are. So a higher number of this will result in a more narrow, like column style formation, like if you're thinking of Testudo, their rank depth is much longer than like a shield wall, for example. So higher number results in a more narrow front. Lower will stretch the unit out a lot more. So rank depth needs to be considered per unit. So if I have an infantry unit versus a cavalry unit, because they have different sizes of individual characters and their number in the unit, rank depth can actually make things look a little bit silly in game. Shield, same thing as missile weapon, melee weapon. You want to pick based on, probably based on the shield they have. But like I said, my character has no shield. They're dual wielding gladiuses. So I gave them Celtic Shock, so they have a shield value, but they're not actually carrying a shield. There's spacing. You know, in game, missile infantry are a lot less close together than line infantry and pikemen and all that, so you can change this, kind of make them a disorganized mob with Falk's infantry, or super organized with Roman infantry. Strengths and weaknesses text. So this shows up in game and it'll say good in melee or poor in melee. Training level elite. I'm not actually sure what this does. I'm being honest. Not actually sure. Officers. So this shows, this lets you decide what the officer of the unit will be. So if you're making a barbarian unit, you probably don't want to choose a Roman centurion. You'll probably want to pick something else. But maybe not. You do you. Articulated record engine is male. Is male you will check, because that affects the voice overs. These things don't care about. Spotting ranges. I've made this character, or this unit is supposed to be a stealthy unit, because it's modeled after a Rome 1 unit that can hide in plain sight. So their spotting distance is a lot lower than base game units, but largely shouldn't have to worry about that. Just refer to base game units. And then these are the selection voiceovers. So you get 3 slots here, and just so they don't say the same thing every time you select them. So you could say, make all 3 of these different. If it's a pike infantry, you can say selected pikemen, so on and so forth. Now to go back, I'll go ahead and go over the tooltip. Pretty sure that was in here, or it's in main units. We'll get to it, I promise. Okay, main units. This one, unit name goes here. Campaign cap. Do you want a limit on how many of these units can exist in the campaign per faction? Put that as something more than 0. Cast light. So I've got light infantry. You can make them medium, heavy, and so on. Create time. How many turns does it take to create them? Is naval. If you're making a ship unit, you want to check that. Land unit. So this absolutely needs to be the same name as what you put in your land units table, because this is where it is calling this stats that you just input. Number of men. How many men are going to be in this unit? And for reference, the number you put in here is for the ultra unit size. So on ultra, an infantry unit will have 160 men. I usually play on large unit size where they have 120. So if I wanted a unit to have 120 on large, I would put 160 here. So putting 120 here will result in my units having 90 on large. Multiplayer cap. How many of these are allowed in custom battles? Multiplayer cost. Custom battle cost. Naval unit. What transport do they show up on in the ocean? How many ships do they have? Just put 1. Minimum men per ship, maximum men per ship. Max should be the max of your unit. Recruitment cost. This is their campaign recruitment cost. Recruitment, movie, religion requirement, you don't need those. Upkeep cost, how much does it take to maintain them per turn? Weight, very light. So they're very light melee infantry, because they don't have a lot of armor. Campaign total cap, -1. I believe if you set this to 0, you will have a cap of 0 on the campaign map, so you will not be able to recruit them at all. -1 means infinite. These 3 things shouldn't be relevant. 4 things. Unique index. So this number here, it needs to be different from every other unit in the entire base game or any other mod unit that you're using. So it's kind of like their social security number. It's unique to them, and if it's the same as somebody else's, that's a real problem. So what I've done is I put in my birthday and then add a number after that, and that should do it. Just make sure this is not the same as any other unit or any mod unit that you're using. Audio language, Roman, because they're a Roman unit. You can change that to other factions as well. Now, okay, so the description of this unit needs to be made. So what we do is we add the short description text. And you see I've added these texts from the base game, from local English pack. And I've gone ahead and named it Roman Arcani _ tooltip. So if we open this, then we can see, and again, this will have all the base game stuff. You can just delete everything and add your own row. Unit description, short text, Rome Arcani _ tooltip. So this part is what you put in the land units tab. And then here, you just type out the description of your unit. So this is what appears on their card when you wave over them. The name that appears of your unit goes in land units localization. And you can delete everything, add your own row. Land units on-screen name, Rome Arcani. This is the thing we've pasted everywhere. So if you've done it all correctly, this should match everything and you'll be fine. Localized string, Arcani. So they're going to show up as Arcani in the game. Done. Now we're going to go to military generator unit qualities. This is essentially the value that the AI puts on this unit. So things like mob, I believe, have less than 100 quality, and then there are some units that have like 10,000 quality because they're super good. If you put this number too high, the AI might end up only recruiting that unit. So you want to look at units similar in role in the base game and then put your unit's quality around that. Again, unit key is your unit name, and you can change this because the AI chooses units based on their type. That way they don't end up with entire armies of cavalry, for example, unless their faction is supposed to do that. Building units allowed. This one is a little bit tricky. There are a ton of buildings in this game, and every single entry here requires its own entry. So it looks like I put in my mom's birthday as the key here. I'd made this mod like 4 years ago. Anyway, so this is the key. This needs to be unique from every base game one and every mod one. So I've got 4 entries, so they're all unique from each other. And then the building, I'm making these units recruitable from temples. That's not really done in the base game. What you'll most likely do is have them in the military main buildings. I recommend you have a save file with a campaign that has one of each of your recruitment buildings, so you can test this, because sometimes there's like Rome Military Main 4, and then there's another entry with a similar name that can be kind of confusing. There's so many buildings. So you might not pick the right one to begin with, so just keep on trying different ones. XP, this is the level of experience they will spawn with, depending on which building they get recruited from. So I allow them to be recruited from the main military building, but if you have a level 5 temple, the Pantheon, they can be recruited at level 3 or 3 bronze chevrons. And that should be it. We should be able to launch the game and play with our unit now. Alright, so now to test my mod, I'm going to activate Arcani Fem Pack. And just to make my life a little easier, I'm going to skip intro mod, so I don't have to hit escape multiple times. This can be helpful when you're crashing on launch, trying to troubleshoot, because you don't have to press escape 3 times to get to the main menu. Custom battle, I'm going to select Rome, and there's my unit, Arcani. Got the description here, all their stats looking good. Yep, everything they've got is there, and you're going to want to verify that they're not invisible in the game. Make sure everything is in the right slots. Warriors! And you can see my Arcani is here. They even have the Gladius in the correct hand. They're hiding, which is good. Warriors, move out! And they just seem to be working overall. So, I'll be happy to answer questions in the comments in case I missed something or I wasn't clear enough. Feel free to ask me. But hopefully this helps the few people remaining in the Rome 2 modding community. Thanks for watching.